living in a world where half of the world's children are denied any opportunity. What does that mean for conflict, for refugee streams, for migration? I'm very passionate about education because I'm the product of a very bold leadership decision in 1956. At the birth of our country, Tunisia, the first president, Habib Bourguiba, he decided to invest 25% of the country's national budget in education. This was really crazy, like there were no streets, no running water, no electricity in most rural Tunisia, and people were like, come on, I mean, what use could be education to a country without infrastructure? And he believed that actually the true infrastructure we had were our brains. So today we are facing an education crisis that needs similar board leadership decisions. And actually it's a learning crisis. I was so lucky to be invited 2 years ago by Gordon Brown to join the Education Commission. And what we wanted to do is to look at what is the scale of the problem and can we do anything about it. So what we found out was really worrying and scary. Today, 250 million kids don't have access to schools, and actually 330 million have access to school, but they're learning nothing that can help them, thrive in the job market. And if we do nothing, by 2030, half of the world's children, which means 800 million children, would either have no access to schooling or will learn only basic primary school skills that won't help them in the job market. And this is like one corner of the disaster triangle. If you add the other corner that like half of the world's job is going to disappear through to automation and digitalization, plus the third corner that actually through demographic changes, most of the changes are going to happen in those areas where most children are going to be born, you end up with the disaster triangle. We were the first actually to look at what are the consequences of this. The first one is that developing countries are going to have 70% less GDP per person as if all children were learning. The second one, we will have as many deaths through this as we have through malaria and AIDS combined. And I don't know how you feel about it, but living in a world where half of the world's children are denied any opportunity, what does that mean for conflict, for refugee streams, for migration, etc.? So when we looked at these depressing numbers, we were thinking like, can you do anything about it? Should we give up and just put our heads on top of our heads, hands on top of our heads? And then what we found out was something amazing. We found that actually you can. We can be the first generation in human history to have every child in school and learning within just one generation. What we did is actually we divided countries in 3 levels: high income, middle income, and low income. And what we found out is if every country moves as fast as the 25% best in their income level, that we could reach that. So basically we're not telling Tunisia to learn from Finland, but saying like to Tunisia now, look at what's happening in Vietnam. So to learn from the best in class, but the best in your class. So Vietnam, for example, introduced standardized assessment for literacy and numeracy. Teachers are better monitored than anyone else, and they can see the achievement of the children, so they can compare to other children. And Vietnam increased its national budget for education from 7% to 20% in 2 decades. And actually surprised the whole world in 2012 in the PISA results by outperforming most OECD countries. We found out something else. We found out actually to be able to learn from the 20 best performers, we have to make innovation, a paradigm shift of what the meaning of a teacher. Let me give an example. Teachers, always we say they're poorly paid, the job is not as exclusive, let's say, as a medical doctor, but why? For each medical doctor in the developing world, you have 10 people helping them, nurses, medical assistants, etc. For teachers, it's less than 0.3%. So imagine a doctor in a ward, they have 20, 40, 70 patients, and they have to do everything, everything. There are no nurses, no medical assistants, no radiologists, nothing. They have to do everything. This is what actually teachers are doing. They have 20, 40, sometimes 70 kids, and they have to do it all. So we have to diversify the workforce. Means introducing more teacher assistant, pedagogical assistants, so that teacher can stop copying, then can stop, cooking, they can stop, over supervising construction of toilets, and can really do what they're trained for, which is teaching. And also we found really very little things that you can do that make a huge difference. And I shared this, I think, the last days. Because when you say every child in school and learning, means every child, means the child in the refugee camp, means the child in the Amazonas, means the child in rural Papua New Guinea. And one thing we found, like a story, an SMS story project in Papua New Guinea. What happened is the schools have no books. There is nothing, but the teacher have mobile phones. So what happens, the teacher get 2 SMS a day. One with a story, because they cannot teach reading without a book, and one with a lessons plan, how to teach the story. So teachers are reminded every day about reading, teaching reading, they're more motivated. And what happened, the number of children who could not read was divided by half through an SMS story project. Because schools still look today like 100 years ago. School is the least reform institution of the world. Imagine if doctors would work like 100 years ago. I don't know who from us will still be alive. So all this we found out working with 300 partners in over 100 countries, and all the lessons learned we are summarized in a report called The Learning Journey that I encourage you to download. But we wanted to make sure a year ago when we presented it in the UN General Assembly that it doesn't stay just a report that dust in drawers. So there were 2 initiatives that followed. One is called the Pioneer Country Initiative. We've chosen 14 countries where this is going to be implemented. These reforms are going to be implemented. Tanzania, for example, introduces with a methodology called Big Results Now. And the pass rate for children moved from 43% to 70%. And the second piece, which makes sure this gets implemented, is who's going to pay for this. So there is a new finance for education facility, which actually is a compact between countries who are going to commit to reforms and the international donors and organizations. What will happen, actually, funds will be pooled, and these are going to be used to give either interest-free loans to countries to borrow for education. Because basically, if you are a low or middle-income country and you want to borrow money for bridges or to build, streets, then it's easy to borrow money on the capital market, but not for education. So this education finance facility will help countries either borrow if they're too poor for, get grants or interest-free loans, or make down the payment for the interest for middle-income countries. And in the last G20 meeting in Hamburg, we succeeded. Education was not even in the agenda, with a lot of advocacy to get education not only on the agenda, but the countries to agree to the education facility. And Argentina, who's leading the G20 next year, is gonna work on this. So basically, as I started, with the bold leadership decision, I'm, investing in a free, high-quality education was a bold leadership decision in 1956. And I'm sure that the Nobel Peace Prize that Tunisia got in 2015 as being the only democracy that to survive the Arab Spring is a legacy to that. So with all the recommendation and technique, we will not reach this. To have every child in school and learning, we need bold leadership decisions, and we need everyone to advocate for investing in leadership and in education, because it's the only infrastructure we have. So join us in the learning generation. Thanks.
Inspire change.